Welcome in to the World-Herald's College World Series preview show. I'm Jon Nyatawa, joined by Nebraska baseball beat writer Evan Bland and our college baseball expert, the digital director at the OWH, Z Long. We came together to talk about the NCAA tournament when the field was announced a couple weeks ago. Had a blast breaking it down, talking college baseball. And now the College World Series field is set. 8 teams are coming to Omaha, and it's back. So we're excited, so excited that we had to get together again, us three, to break down the field, talk about our CWS memories and experiences, and just our excitement. We needed some way to just share our excitement with you, our readers, who we think are just as excited, because it seems like there's a lot of buzz and energy for the College World Series. Obviously, last year the event was canceled due to the pandemic, but again, it's back, 100% capacity with fans. There's going to be some things different, and you'll see that if you're down there at the ballpark. We'll try to touch on those a little bit here in this preview show. But again, just super excited. So Z, Evan, let me throw it to you. We'll go around the horn here for a second. What are you most excited about in terms of the return of the CWS? Like, what are you most looking forward to experiencing when the series kicks off on Saturday with those two doubleheader games?
Go ahead, Z.
Well, John, I think the first thing is it's going to be emotional. I know it's going to be emotional for me, and I think it's going to be emotional for a lot of people in Omaha. And for me, it's that little moment right before the game, before the starting lineups, and they play that intro, and you hear that old school organ music, from the days of Rosenblatt, now played there, and they show that little montage and that intro, and the teams get ready to come out for introductions. And I think that's going to be a goosebump, surreal moment, because it's been a long year. We've lost a lot of people and lost a lot of things in our life. And this event, I think, is indicative of starting to feel a little bit better about things. And I tell you what, it's going to be hard to contain those emotions, but to see the CWS back in Omaha, to hear that organ music and see those teams walk out on that third and first base line on Saturday at 1:00, that's going to be a hell of a moment that, I think I'll probably remember the rest of my life. And, it's a heck of a thing. I'm just glad to have baseball back in Omaha.
Yeah, I would echo that. To me, it's the stuff around the game that makes it special. I mean, we've had college baseball back now, thankfully, for this entire season. I just think of, all the different fan bases tailgating the parking lot. I mean, LSU is going to have a presence, even though they're not here. Arkansas, they're going to have a presence, even though they're not here. You can kind of go down the list. I'm going to be excited to see how many people make this trip. Like you mentioned, John, with not having CWS last year, how much extra excitement, how much extra anticipation there is for this thing. I expect parking lots to be full. I expect to smell, bratwursts and hamburgers and see the adult beverages and all this stuff going on. I expect to see the souvenir shops full and people coming and going from the hotels. And, we just haven't had a lot of that. I mean, Omaha in general has had so many sporting events stolen away from it because of the pandemic in the last year and a half. And this is that crown jewel for the city to have it back for 12 days. I'm just excited for all the colors, for the youth baseball teams coming in to take in a game, from all over the region, the fathers and sons that get a chance to do this, the people that are reunited, all that stuff. I think in addition to the games, which will be awesome and set up to be really intriguing, but just the energy, the fans, how this is sort of what you do in this area in mid to late June. And we didn't have that last year. And now, it's almost like you're starting a new tradition this year. And I'm really excited to see what that feels like moving forward.
Yeah, it's something like it's almost an intangible sort of attachment that I think a lot of us have with the College World Series, or what we enjoy the most about it. Like, the games are good always, like there's some fun moments in games and some iconic moments already that you can just think about at the top of your head. But it's I don't know, for me, it's like that the sights and the sounds that really stick out. Walking the concourse and hearing fans chant, and their chants are like echoing through the concourse, because all the main fans are kind of like tucked up underneath the overhang there in the first deck. So their chants like ring through the stadium when you're walking the concourse. Like you said, Evan, just the smell of food and like traffic. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who are associated with the College World Series or have connection to the event or just like to go and watch it, said that last year there's sort of a longing to just be there and drove. So they drove by, and it's June 20th or whatever, and it's dead, and downtown there's nothing happening. Obviously, we were in the middle of the pandemic at that point, so just being jammed up with a bunch of people in traffic waiting to find your parking spot, your tailgate spot, get to the stadium, I think we'll have sort of a little bit of a as fun as it could be. I was like, who's excited for traffic? But I am in a way. It's weird. So yeah, I think Z, you mentioned the opening video. That'll be cool. I think the just the scene of baseball players being in Omaha and having it on TV and having the atmosphere sort of stand out, the scenes of it. Evan, you've got the TD Ameritrade Park backdrop on your on your screen right now. It's like, I haven't seen that thing full in 2 years, so it'll be nice to because I go to I cover Creighton, obviously Creighton baseball, and while they get decent crowds for the program that they are, the stadium's never full the way it is for the College World Series. So there's always a different energy when you walk into the building. Even though for me, I've been in the building a few times since the 2019 College World Series. So it's going to be fun, and it's going to kick off at least from an action on the field standpoint. It's going to be in your face, incredibly compelling right from the start. Like the teams, this field is incredibly deep. It feels really balanced. The teams that maybe quote unquote weren't supposed to get here, who weren't one seeds, are like traditional powers that you can understand have a ton of talent, and you can see, oh yeah, that's how they got here. I mean, it makes total sense. It's not sort of a surprise flash in the pan sort of run that these teams went on, like, oh no, they're legit. And so I feel like anything can happen. I'm wondering what you guys think. And now you see the field: Vandy, Arizona, Stanford, NC State, Virginia, Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi State. I mean, that's loaded, right? Like I don't even know I'm looking at how do you predict a winner here? This is a great group of teams, it seems, that have made it to Omaha.
Yeah, one thing I would say, just in kind of doing some research today, there's no dominant conference necessarily. I mean, the SEC has 3 teams, the Pac-12 has a couple, the ACC has a couple, the Big 12 brought Texas. So you have a lot of different areas sort of represented. I think what's really interesting is Arkansas's absence. I mean, they were so clearly the bona fide title favorites. You look around all the national publications out there, everyone said that the Razorbacks would be that team to beat heading into Omaha, and they're not here. And so I think it's interesting because it creates a little bit of a void where, yeah, Texas is the 2 seed and Tennessee's the 3 and Vanderbilt's the 4, but they have almost nobody left.
And Arizona's the 5.
Right. So you have those other teams, but even Vandy, they have Kumar Rocker and nobody else who played in that CWS run 2 years ago. So I just think it's fascinating that, yeah, you have a lot of chalk in some ways, but it does feel wide open. There's no consensus favorite. I mean, you can make an argument for, I think, 4 or 5 teams legitimately to be considered the favorites this weekend. I mean, and everybody, I was just trying to do some statistical breakdowns. Just about everybody has good pitching. Just about everybody hits for power. The defenses are solid. There's not that, as much as we love the Cinderellas and the 4 seeds and things like that, there's not that team that kind of got lucky and maybe got all the right breaks. I mean, these are teams that had legitimate seasons. Like you said, John, they won, they earned it in the regional and the super regional round. And it's going to make for a fun couple of weeks because you just don't know how it's going to end up. It's all going to come down to matchups and maybe a clutch hit or two here or there along the way.
What do you think of this field, Z? I mean, you followed the sport all year.
Yeah, I mean,
now it's loaded, right?
Yeah, it is. It's an absolutely loaded bracket, and I think one of the key things we just talked about, it's hard to discount a team. Usually every year you can look at that bracket and go, well, they'd have a tough path or they got to get through here. We have surprises. You look at this field at all 8 teams and you could argue yourself into saying that all 8 of them could win this thing if certain things happen for them. Even Virginia, which has kind of been up and down this year, we were discussing before this started, they're like a White Walker or a zombie. You better kill them, because if they're near you in a game late, they have an ability the last 2 weeks to absolutely dramatically put you away, whether it's a walk-off home run or a grand slam like they did yesterday. So even with them in there, man, this is just a loaded field. And the first thing I thought about when the initial bracket for everything came out was Vanderbilt being a 4 seed, because they're in the top half of that bracket. And as you mentioned, Arkansas is not there, and man, Vanderbilt is looking very good in the top half of that bracket with that pitching staff. I think that's going to be a fascinating first round game. And like you said, I think the main key point I would make is go to the games, friends, because I think every day, whether it's an elimination game or not, these teams are so good. This is going to be high value, high brand, must see baseball.
You guys have both talked about Arizona, so why don't we kind of go down that path a little bit? Obviously, NC State gets its doors blown off in the first round of the Super Regional, 21-2, and everyone's thinking, I mean, I saw it on my Twitter timeline from Husker fans, like, why did NC State even get to host a regional? That, like, it just shows the once again, another example of how the selection committee messed up and gave Nebraska obviously a tough draw. But then NC State, man, just bounced back. A team that started 1-8 in league play. It's kind of been its MO all year, taking in some adversity and then fighting back. NC State won 2 games on the road at Arkansas. And it's funny, man, we talked about how difficult, especially in the postseason, it is to win at Arkansas. And then this team, which you mentioned, Evan, was built up to be, I mean, it won the SEC, won an SEC championship, it's the best league in the country. Like, it wasn't a fluke.
No.
So, but they're down and they're out. And so NC State took them down. Since you saw Arkansas in person, Evan, I guess what does it say about NC State that it was able to accomplish that? And maybe as a piggyback off that, maybe we can pivot away from the CWS for a second, since we got you here and you got a ton of Nebraska baseball insight. How far away do you feel Nebraska is? Like, I felt like they were really close to getting over the hump and taking down an Arkansas, but weren't able to get it done, whereas NC State did. What's sort of your takeaway, having seen Arkansas in person and seeing them pushed a little bit, and the fact that NC State was able to actually move past them and take them down?
Well, I felt like after seeing Arkansas all weekend in that regional, like I told Z on our trip back, like, if the Hogs made it to Omaha, I was not picking them to win at all, because I just felt like that was a team that, had a gaudy resume, but what it did in the regionals, in my opinion, was not all that impressive. I mean, it hit right around 200 in games against teams not named NJIT. It absolutely relied on solo shots to keep itself in the game offensively. And it was effectively down to 2 pitchers in Patrick Wicklander and Kevin Kopps. Those were the only guys that Dave Van Horn trusted to put out there in a high leverage clutch spot. And so I just felt like if you get into a double elimination format at the CWS, where you're going to need to play a number of games in a row, I didn't know that the offense was hitting or clicking at a good rate, and that the pitching was going to run out early, because again, they had some injuries to their number 2 starter and to some of their top bullpen guys that were really going to limit what they could do. But that said, I mean, even with the way Arkansas was going at that point, for NC State to come into Baum Walker in front of 11,000 plus to win that 3rd game the way they did, hitting a home run off Kevin Kopps late, who had thrown a ton of pitches, 300 plus in 2 weeks. I mean, that's darn impressive. And I think if you're a Wolfpack fan and you're coming to Omaha, you got to be thinking, like, they've already faced as hard as it's going to be. I mean, you've already been in incredibly hostile territory against probably college baseball's pitcher of the year in Kopps. It's got to be downhill from here a little bit, right? Like in a neutral setting against teams that maybe aren't quite as accomplished as what Arkansas did this year. So I think from that standpoint, NC State's a really interesting team to watch, even though statistically they don't have a ton of pitching depth, and you can kind of poke some holes in what might be, their chances to go deep. From a Nebraska standpoint, the fact that Arkansas is not in Omaha, it gives I suppose it gives a hit to the argument that Nebraska would belong in the CWS field, right? Because Arkansas is not here and they lost to Arkansas. But, you look at some of the things that these teams here in Omaha have done well, just in terms of the balance, how they field the ball, how they score, the depth of pitching. Like from that standpoint, Nebraska absolutely would belong. They were a balanced team all year. I would have been very curious to see how they would have done in just about any other regional. So stick them where they stuck Maryland or Michigan in that regional round, and you never know. And I feel like that team in a super regional setting, that team being Nebraska, would have been really interesting too, with Povich and Schwellenbach and some of the high end arms that they had available. We'll never know. And I think it's likely we'll look back on this season as that sort of springboard for what Nebraska will be in the next few years under Will Bolt. But I think ultimately Arkansas is not here. It's tough to draw too strong of conclusions maybe on how their season would have gone. But absolutely, it would have been fun to see how they could have handled the postseason if they were just about anywhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting. Nebraska hasn't been to the College World Series obviously since 2005, and what a scene that was, and the stories are epic from that run, and it kind of feels a little magical at this point, just because of the challenges that Northern teams face, and now Nebraska, instead of being linked with the Big 12, is linked with the Big 10. But again, we've seen Big 10 teams make runs to Omaha. Obviously, Michigan just did it 2 years ago and made it to the championship game. And the fact that Nebraska pushed Arkansas to the limit makes you think, okay, it is possible. Whereas I don't know if I would have felt that even 3 months ago or 4 months. Not that it's not possible, anything's possible in sport, but like just how far of a gap it felt. Even though Nebraska had been making regionals, and been in the mix, and you say, hey, just get in there and you have a chance. It just felt like the intimidating SEC regional that you most likely would have to go through, or super regional, to have to win at Arkansas or go through a Vandy. Well, NC State, granted, it is an ACC team and has some history behind it and obviously some talent, but it did that. And so it's like, yeah, maybe, the possibilities seem almost more reasonable now for the Huskers. And so we'll see how Will Bolt builds this team going forward and how they build off the momentum. It'll be really intriguing. But yeah, NC State, man, like, I don't know. They seem like they're a team with a lot of grit. And if there is an underdog in this field, I feel like it might be NC State, even though NC State was last year in 2013. So there is some history, some pedigree, certainly. But at least for the locals, like, they might be excited that, there was a little bit of bad blood between Nebraska and Arkansas fans, right? And so if you're a College World Series supporter, a lot of those folks are Nebraska baseball fans. Maybe they latch on to the NC State bandwagon and start rooting for the Wolfpack here in Omaha. That might be fun to watch, to see. I mean, I am kind of eager to see which team the local fans kind of rally behind, and maybe it's an NC State if it can win a game or two and make a run. Like it would be a fun sort of, again, like, they're legit. Don't get me wrong, but you look at some of these other juggernauts and it's like, well, I guess if you had to pick one team, maybe that's NC State. They open up against Stanford in the first game of the whole event. So that'll be really exciting. I wonder, Z, while that game is pretty compelling, is that the game you want to see in the first couple days, or is there another game that you're looking forward to? Like, what's the matchup that most intrigues you to open CWS play, Z?
Well, I think the cliche answer is all of them, John. All of them are going to be fantastic matchups. But I think the one that, for me, in terms of looking at predicting this bracket, there's a lot of sexiness to some of those matchups. Texas, Mississippi State, yeah, inject that straight into my arm. I'm all about that tradition. But here's the thing I really hone in on is that Arizona-Vanderbilt matchup. That is a massive first-round matchup, because either way that goes there sets up that team in great shape, whoever wins that game. And if it's Vanderbilt who wins that game with presumably Kamar Rocker, then somebody's going to have to deal with Jack Leiter in round 2. And then if they win that, there you go. You got Vandy sitting there with its pitching intact, having to be beat twice. But Arizona, I am not discounting one iota. Those cats, no pun intended, can swing the bat. They can hurt the baseball, and they were super impressive in their regional and their super regional win over Ole Miss this past weekend. So I think a lot of how this tournament turns out really keys on that Vanderbilt-Arizona matchup.
Yeah,
What about you, Evan?
I agree. That's the headliner if you're talking about prime time, star power, future MLB talent sort of thing. Kumar Rocker against that Arizona lineup is really appealing. That's going to be a ton of fun to watch. The Stanford NC State game will be pretty interesting too. I mean, I think that's going to be a high scoring game. Those are the two staffs with the worst ERAs in the field. They both play really good defense. They both hit for a ton of power. I feel like if you're a fan of runs and slugfests, that's going to be the game for you is Stanford NC State to get this thing started. But how about Mississippi State, Texas, right? Like that's really fascinating too, with two really tradition rich programs. Mississippi State's been here in Omaha now for a few years. Texas, it's been a little while since they've been back, and there's a big following in this region of Texas fans. I expect to see plenty of burnt orange out there too. Texas is from the Big 12, but they have that SEC kind of feel to them. That's going to be another one, I think, where you're really going to hear the fan bases in TD Ameritrade Park for that one make themselves known. Maybe outside the Vandy Whistler, that's going to be one of the louder games that we'll see. But somebody's going to start that thing strong. And if Texas gets into a run, it's going to start feeling like the mid 2000s again. And Mississippi State's been here plenty, but they've never won a title. So I think whoever comes out of that thing early on, that fan base is going to be jacked moving forward in that side of the bracket.
Yeah, this is the third straight CWS bid for Mississippi State. So they're kind of becoming familiar bringing Stark Vegas up to Omaha. Their fans are tremendous. And I am curious if they're going to go all in on weekend one, if they're going to go all in on the full trip, or save sort of some of their resources and time and hope that their team can make it to the finals. And then we'll see a true invasion of Omaha with Mississippi State fans. But, we see them up here in Omaha, even if their team's not here. So well represented. That's going to be fun. As you mentioned, that matchup. But speaking of fan bases, what about Tennessee? Like, how much orange are we going to see in Omaha? I saw the atmosphere in their regional, super regional looked off the charts, amazing. Obviously, Tennessee hasn't. It went 13 years without reaching a regional until 2019, broke through, and has come a long way. Obviously, in a tough league. Obviously, in the SEC, it's like one of those things. If you fall off and you're down on the bottom, and you're trying to build up. In the SEC, it's really difficult to do. So kudos to the Volunteers who've done that. And now here they are. They're headed to Omaha for the first time since 2005. And it's a really fun team that plays with a ton of energy, kind of emblematic of its coach. Demonstrative. I think that if their fans travel the way that they might, it could make for a lot of fun with them going up against Virginia right from the start. So I'm curious, like, how much orange are we going to see day one, day two, day three? Like, it could be a lot.
It's going to be a lot, especially since they're playing Virginia. The entire thing is going to be orange. When I was building a bracket yesterday for our graphics, I had to find 3 different shades of orange for this World Series, John. So yeah, you might have a trouble, but if you're a true fan, those are 3 distinctively different shades. So yeah, don't mix those up. But after seeing what Tennessee had in their super regional and their regional, they had people packed across the street in an alleyway watching it on a big screen TV. I expect a lot of Rocky Top in Omaha this weekend. And man, that team, I know we've said they all can win it, but I'm telling you straight up, Tennessee can win this entire thing. That team absolutely crushes the baseball. They're not cheap home runs. They murder the baseball. And talk about a first-round pitching matchup. Oh, yes, give me all of that. Andrew Abbott from Virginia and most likely Chad Dallas from Tennessee. Abbott, 152 strikeouts on the year, one of the most premier veteran pitchers in the country against that lineup, the way they swing the bat. Yes, sir. That is going to be a dandy of an all-orange baseball game.
Yeah. Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, too, and just think, if Tennessee and Texas win, we're going to have a battle of orange UTs in the next round, and that's going to be quite the event. The thing about Tennessee, if I could just add, other than the fact that Rocky Top might be the best school fight song out there, in my opinion, I think it's extremely catchy.
Ooh, but, is Rocky Top is that the best one here in Omaha?
Texas is fine. I like that. The eyes of Texas can be decent, but Rocky Top to me, when I
It's
would
the
do
most.
it,
Yeah, I think it's catchy. It's hard not to hum to. It's hard not to tap the foot to.
it is. It's jazzy. It felt like it was ahead of its time when it came out. But
I attended a Tennessee basketball game, actually a Tennessee women's basketball game once. They play Rocky Top a lot, so I don't know how often we're going to hear that thing. Probably a lot, but that's good.
I mean, Boomer Sooner, you kind of, I know, Z, you're an Oklahoma guy, but I can hear Boomer Sooner 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, okay, I'm sick of this thing. Rocky Top, let's keep it rolling. Let's play that back.
We might be humming it for weeks on end all summer, but I'm with you. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all good. All I was going to say about Tennessee was it feels to me like this could be the start of a new power in the SEC. I mean, Tony Vitello in his 4th year has really gotten that thing going. One thing that's really amazed me about that program is they didn't even make a regional between 2006 and 2018. They didn't even make the postseason. And a lot of that has to do with the SEC and how difficult that is. But it also really speaks to how far this program's come in the last few years. I know the fan base there has been pretty nervous about keeping their coach, especially with so many high-profile jobs that have been coming open. But if he stays, it really does feel like this is a young guy who's turned around a program, and this could be the first of quite a few trips that we see this program make. And you look through the lineup of these CWS qualifiers, and you see that with some other schools. I mean, Coach Corbin from Vanderbilt was the same sort of deal. Like, he resurrected that program, and they became regulars. And it feels to me like Tennessee could kind of be that newcomer on the block, that next school that we start seeing here with more frequency in Omaha.
And they're going to open up against Virginia, which, I mean, if history repeats itself, Virginia in 2015, when it won the national title, was not a regional host. I think it was a 3 seed that year, made a run. And it didn't catch people by surprise either, because it had been in the title series the year before. So, Brian O'Connor's bunch, he's a winner. He knows how to get those guys going. And we've talked a lot about teams defending well, like Virginia, felt like a month's worth of highlights defensively in that series against Dallas Baptist, coming back from down 1-0 and making some big time plays. And those games were really compelling and fun to watch. And they got some clutch hits. And Z, what's the name of the pitcher with the Dippin' Dots at Virginia? You know what I'm talking about?
The Dippin' Dots?
Yeah, the Dippin' Dots guy.
I was not watching during the Dippin' Dots session.
Oh man, is Steven Scotch? is that how you say his name? This dude, he gave one of the best post-game interviews of all time during the regional round, and mentioned about, he heard a fan talking about, hey, I'll give you some Dippin' Dots if you blow this, and so he reveals that during his interview, and he's talking about well, is it worth it? I mean, it's credit. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. Just Google Virginia Dippin' Dots and you'll find it. Quite the character. Let's just say that. And so,
Ellen, watch that team too, for the obvious reason that Omaha will get behind them.
You think so?
It's been much documented. Brian O'Connor's permanent connections to the TD Ameritrade Park, the statue, but even last time, their support of the Omaha Police Department, and Kerry Orozco, those are things that this community remembers. So yeah, they get up and get in a game against Tennessee. I could see Omaha definitely supporting one of their own right there and getting behind Virginia. We saw it in 2015.
What's going to be different, guys? I think while it is awesome that the event is back, I think it's worth mentioning and just sort of reminding fans that, hey, we're still sort of pseudo in the middle of a pandemic. And actually, more importantly, or maybe more appropriately here in terms of the context of this conversation, the event was mostly a large part of it was planned sort of with the idea that the pandemic would stretch through the summer, or could stretch through the summer. So when you go through the ballpark and you're kind of taking in your experience, remember that it was only maybe a month ago that the attendance was it was announced that the attendance would move to 100%. I think organizers, both at the NCAA level and here locally, were thinking in the months of March, April, February, when a good crux of the planning process takes place for this event, we're thinking, okay, we're going to be dealing with smaller crowds. We're going to be dealing with potentially masks, social distancing rules in place. So it feels like an event. And I think you'll get this sense when you're there is like, are we still in a pandemic? Like there's like the players are going to be in a little bit of a bubble, not a true bubble. Obviously, they're not going to that those types of lengths, but they're going to try to limit the interaction that players have with the public, with everyone, to keep them from testing. But I think that it's a result of organizers saying like back in March, we don't know what's going to happen, so let's just try to prepare for it if indeed the pandemic kind of stretches through June. And while a lot of restrictions across the country have been lifted and we're feeling a sort of return to normalcy, and the series is back and there's going to be the seats are going to be full, I think that the experience might be a little bit different. But maybe what are your guys' thoughts on that? Is it going to impact the way you enjoy the series at all? Having sort of examples or ties to the fact that the pandemic's still going on.
I mean, I would just say, I think if you're a fan showing up, you probably won't notice much that's out of the ordinary. I mean, it's going to be full capacity. If you go out to restaurants, it's going to be seating as usual, things like that.
I will say, I think they're going to have a smaller fan fest, for example.
Yeah. Well, yes. The Friday festivities and
opening ceremonies, practice sessions not happening.
Right. That's true. And those are changes this year. And I mean, if the players really are in bubbles, then you're not going to see the hospital visits and some of the community things that teams have done on their off days.
Less opportunities for autographs. I don't know how much interaction. I always got the sense that players would kind of walk the streets in the old market and like go to restaurants as a team or with their families and interact with locals in that way. They'd have cookouts put on by nonprofits. Like, I'm not quite sure at this point how much different it'll be for them. And then in turn, the rest of the community, when we get to kind of see those guys outside the ballpark and just where they basically take up residency in Omaha, especially those teams that make it to the CWS finals. They're here for like 2 weeks. So they're going, like you said, hospital visits, going to the zoo, going to all these restaurants. And inevitably, if you're here part of the community, you run into these guys. And a lot of the players talk often, those who've experienced it, they love that. They love running into someone from Omaha who's like, hey, good luck, Virginia, or like, let's go Florida. Just having those interactions with fans. They always have said, it's kind of like they feel like a rock star walking through Omaha for these 2 weeks. Like they're really well supported and recognized. Are they going to get that experience? I don't know. I guess we'll find out as the event unfolds.
Well, I mean, it's a weird kind of middle gray area where on the one hand you have what the NCAA policy is for post games. I mean, in a typical year, as media people, we can go down and talk to players in the locker room, and they go out and have a press conference, and all that's going to be virtual this year. And then, so you kind of put that on one side, and on the other side, you have full capacity. You have people that have wanted to be vaccinated are vaccinated, and have some distance between that. And so, yeah, I mean, it does feel like maybe from a player's perspective, you're going to miss out on a lot of the other stuff, the off the field stuff that makes the College World Series what it is. And I can say, having been with Z in Arkansas for the regional, I mean, in some ways, it's honestly kind of ridiculous because in one moment we're doing Zoom post games with teams, and in the next moment, the entire NJIT team is in left field high-fiving the general admission crowd and joining into the party. So, like, it doesn't take much to look around and see that the players through regionals and super regionals really have not been in a bubble or in this tier 1 status that the NCAA has put out there. And I think as Z would attest to, a lot of it has come not even so much from the NCAA, but ESPN with its announcers not being on site, with how they've approached things. And I know they will be on site for the College World Series, but it's this weird kind of back end of the pandemic thing where from a fan perspective, if you're at the game, it's probably going to be business as usual. But if you're a player who's been here before, I got to think it's going to be not quite as fulfilling or robust as an experience as it would have been in the past.
Yeah, and I was just over at the ballpark previewing the food, doing really important journalistic work. And, here's the thing I will tell you that you'll notice as a fan. One, no Friday night festivities. So your opening ceremony and your fireworks not going to take place, which is usually kind of a big thing, especially for families with kids. That's autograph day, and that's going to be disappointing. That's the one big thing you're going to notice, but God knows there's plenty of stuff outside that ballpark to keep you entertained on Friday night. The other big one is the GA. For years, the outfield has been general admission. Everyone gets in a giant line and comes rolling into the park. You're not going to see that this year because those outfield sections are going to be ticketed, as in you have a seat number. And a lot of that is to reduce people standing in giant lines down the side of TD Ameritrade Park. So that's one big thing you'll notice there. As for inside the stadium, food is going to be just as cool, just a little bit reduced, but they're still going to go back to some favorites, and no tap beer. It's going to be all canned beer inside there, which I say thank God, because that's going to make the lines go faster. Not that I ever drink while I'm working, just to be clear. And the other big thing,
I hope they go faster, Z, because but they still gotta. Last time I was there and I ordered an adult beverage, I think they popped the top for me. I was like, you guys, from an efficiency standpoint, that takes forever. And then I think one time I don't remember if every time they do that, but I think they poured it into a cup for me. I'm like, guys, I got two hands, I can do both of those things, but
Hey, well, you know what? They need to go across the street and train up at the mattress factory, the slow down session room. Watch those pros, how fast they are with stuff. With that's like a quick draw thing. They'll get them trained up. But, and as for the bubble thing you guys mentioned, let's be honest. I know the NCAA is doing the best thing here and trying to protect these kids. But, we saw entire volleyball teams strolling around Old Market and downtown during the NCAA volleyball tournament. You cannot tell a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old kids to stay in a hotel room for 2 weeks straight when their entire family and fan bases are up here. They're going to do what they're going to do, and their safety at this point, has been a lot in their hands. They've walked this tightrope for a long time, but I think those are the only noticeable things you're going to see as a fan is the no Friday ceremonies and the outfield being a little less chaotic in those bleachers.
The beach balls, are beach balls getting smuggled into the stadium? We're going to have to rely on these sophisticated advanced reserved seat buying crowd. Instead of standing in the line and preparing and
as you can tell, man, TD Ameritrade and the folks at Mecca, they have good security. Okay. But these cats manage to sneak. I don't want to know where they're sneaking those in at. I probably do not want to know where they're sneaking those in at. But all of a sudden you see all these beach balls, and today I did appeal for all you Mississippi State fans out there. I did jokingly appeal to Mecca. And I was like, well, if the Vandy Whistler, if that guy can whistle, you guys should let cowbells in. Because at least then we have cowbells in the stadium. I'm not for sure that my plea went very far, but I would like, in a pandemic year, we should have more cowbell at CWS.
I'm sure there will be one or two that at least appears for a moment before it's confiscated and taken away. So yeah, the rowdy and lively outfield scene that we're accustomed to, maybe not as much. We'll find that out as the series unfolds. What about on the field, guys? What are you intrigued by, or just in terms of what you think you'll see? It's been 2 years since we've seen a College World Series game, the top end of college baseball here in Omaha. So 2 years is a long time. Trends happen, things have changed. The game has evolved slowly. It always evolves slowly, but things might be different. I don't know. What do you think the action on the field is going to look like when some of these juggernauts go down and start battling each other this weekend?
Well, I mean, it feels like it's going to be more of a major league approach than we've seen in a while, where it's the three true outcomes. Can you draw the walks? Can you hit the home runs? Can you get the strikeouts? And I think, that analytics revolution from the majors has been trickling down into college baseball over the years. There's been a lot more blend in recent years between coaches from professional baseball and college ball. Even 10 years ago, college coaches were going on YouTube and trying to find any scraps of video they could to scout opponents. And now you can pay services that give you detailed spray charts and breakdowns and things like that. So we've seen a lot of that trickle into college baseball. It'll be interesting this weekend how much of that we'll actually see at the CWS, because again, these power bats are going up against some high end arms who are going to go be high draft picks here next month. It'll be interesting to see how much of that actually plays out this weekend, if teams have to get a little creative or go out of their comfort zones to generate a run against a Jack Leiter or a Kumar Rocker or whoever it might be. so I think that's kind of, one fascinating thing. And I guess this would be a little bit more off the field, but I'm interested too to see, how the no draft thing plays out in Omaha. I mean, every year from the beginning, anyone who comes to Omaha, you can identify this player and that player as, hey, they were drafted by this team, they went in this round. Whereas this year, I mean, in some ways, some of these guys are still playing for pro dollars, right? Like if you're getting drafted next month, what better showcase for your abilities and for what you can do for a team than what you do on the biggest stage on national TV with a championship on the line. So I think that dynamic too is going to be really interesting, where there's nothing in hand, I guess, for any of these players yet. You're still trying to prove yourself, earn that pick. And I wonder if we'll feel that, or if we'll notice that in any way with so much high-end talent, spread across the rosters of these qualifiers.
Yeah. And it's, I think that's the one thing I kick in on too, is the dynamic that John and you both mentioned. It's the home run versus the alternative. This park has historically, well documented, played big, but we've seen the ball get out of ballparks during the postseason and the whole season. And even John and I, watching Big East baseball in there this year, there were some shots, there were some big home runs hit. So I expect that to continue. And I think one of the big things is how you respond and sustain versus a team when they hit that bomb, when they hit that big home run to go up. Do you got the counterpunch that what you can do there? And then also, if this park does decide to play big, I look at those teams who can do other things, and two stand out right off the way. It's University of Texas. That team, David Pierce, this is his second trip to Omaha, but man, they remind me of Augie Garrido's baseball teams. They play small ball. They absolutely irritate you on the base pass. Hey, John, here's a name everyone will remember if you're a Creighton fan. Mike Antico. Remember that dude? Yeah, the St. John transferred at Texas. What's he at? 39 of 43 on stolen bases this year. Texas, while they can hit bombs and they've got hitters, don't get me wrong, man, they can play small ball beautifully. That's a team that could be a problem, when it comes to generating runs. And then Vanderbilt, I know they got kids that can swing it, but when you've got a all-world leadoff hitter and center fielder and Enrique Bradfield Jr., he is a nightmare on the base pass. So I really watch the dynamic of those two teams. If they start generating runs by sacrifices, base hits, station to station. So if a team, as we saw, famously, the number one seed who's not here anymore, if you live and die by the home run, it may have got you to this point, but I want to see those teams that can play this big ball yard and at times find a way to win when maybe the ball is not flying out of the park.
Yeah, a lot of it feels like it kind of depends on the day where the wind's blowing. But certainly the new baseball, the change there has totally transformed the style of play at TD Ameritrade Park. It's no longer the sort of pitcher's paradise that it had been labeled as. Now, while I think it is still pitcher friendly, you could definitely knock that ball out of the park. Evan, I interrupted. What were you about to say?
Oh, you're good. No, I was just going to make some loose analogy to how living and dying by the home run is sort of the baseball equivalent of shooting the three, right? In basketball, where like if you're on, man, you're unstoppable. But if you're not, you better find a way to work a pick and roll or get inside or get a layup or something like that.
It's been interesting watching the regional and super regional rounds, because it feels like depending on the day, some of these offenses have just been so hot and electric, like exploded for 12, 13, 16, 17 runs. And then the next day it's a pitcher's duel, or, it's a little bit harder to get those runs across. Suddenly the game's 3-4 or 3-2, so it's like, I wonder if we'll see some of those swings in terms of just gameplay and style over the course of the next couple of weeks too. And back to something that you said, Evan, about the true outcomes, and just looking at the stats, like we had 119 walks in the College World Series in 2019. That's the most in TD Ameritrade Park history, at least since the series moved to TD Ameritrade Park. The strikeouts was 294. That's the most since like the 50s in the CWS. The home runs, there were 22 homers, which is one off the record at TD Ameritrade Park, 23, again, for just the CWS only. So if those trends continue, we'll see. I am curious, but it feels like they might feel like we might see more than 23 bombs, but a lot of Ks and maybe a lot of walks. But again, with some of these offenses and some of the speedsters that Z mentioned, walks could be really deadly, and then maybe it could entice some of these teams to play a little bit more station to station, knowing how elite some of these pitching staffs are and how many just dynamic arms they're going to have to go up against. So very intrigued by how things go on. Anything else you wanted to add, Evan? Because I know I just keep interrupting you.
No, not at all. I would throw out one other thing that I think is really interesting about this College World Series, and that's, it's been a decade now since Rosenblatt has given way to TD Ameritrade as the home of the CWS, and there have been a lot of growing pains, like you mentioned, John. Like the fences were brought in, there was the whole thing about this is where home runs go to die, things like that.
Yeah, and they didn't change the fences, but there was a push to bring those fences in. Everyone wanted.
There's been more balance brought to the games, I suppose, is a better way to say it. But
definitely.
And you look at how the area around the park has grown in the last 10 years with the restaurants and the businesses and things like that. I just wonder if this is the year that TD Ameritrade Park really feels like the home of the College World Series, because everyone misses it so much from last year. There's going to be such an embrace of the event again, just to have it back, that I wonder if we've maybe kind of heard the last, opining for Rosenblatt. And as amazing as that time was, it feels like this could really be the start of, okay, this is what it is. And people are excited to come here. And people are going to relish this experience for what it is today. It feels like, as much as the pandemic was hurt that last year and everyone missed it, maybe it's the thing that spurs this along as the place to be for the CWS moving forward.
I think you'll always have some fans who are drawn to Rosenblatt and the feel of that ballpark and the memories made there. But that's a good point. Like TD Ameritrade Park feels like it's always needed. It's needed some charm. It's needed some like history attached to it, some iconic moments. It was built brand new in the middle of downtown, so there's this corporate feel to it. So like, how do we make it a little bit more homely and more inviting and more warm? And maybe the fact that we just didn't have a place to go last year by default has that effect. So I like where your head's at. Perhaps there will be a little bit more sort of embracing of it. I like it. I think, like you said, it's grown so much over the last 10 years that the party scene and the events that are happening outside the ballpark, to me, it's starting to become a part of what this College World Series is. And while we love the games and we love the players and the drama that goes on the field, like the experiences that fans have outside the stadium is worth, like, there's no price of admission there. Well, I guess some cover charges depending on what beer garden you go to, but like that experience is unique unto itself too. So yeah, I'll be curious to hear from fans over the course of the next couple of weeks, just how they're taking it in and how much they're embracing it. So it should be fun. Do we have any picks? Z, it sounds like you're going with Texas. Like I feel like you might need to take off that black sweater and put on a burnt orange polo or something, because it kind of feels like you're leaning toward the Longhorns right now.
Yeah, coming from a family that's had OU season football tickets for 60 years, if I put on that burnt orange, I'm going to have a much bigger problem domestically than I really want to deal with right now. For me, I look at the top bracket and I told you everything I think hinges for me, and I'm not discounting Stanford and NC State. Those are two great ball clubs, and I will not be shocked if they do something. But for me, it comes down to that Arizona-Vandy first-round matchup. And if Vanderbilt gets past that, that is my pick to come out of that top bracket. Their pitching is too good, and I don't want to just focus on their pitching. Just because their guys are going to go 1 and 2 in the Major League Draft, most likely, that team can hit. They hit a grand slam against Georgia Tech in that regional to win that. And with Enrique Bradfield Jr. and the speed, Gonzalez, there's so many power bats in that lineup. I think they're coming out of that top bracket. The bottom bracket is so hard, guys. I could argue my way into 3 of those 4 teams with ease coming out of there if they get hot on a certain day. But I am going to go back to what I said earlier. I like the dynamic of the University of Texas to both hit for power, but also irritate you on the base pass. And let's be honest, Ty Madden speaking of people who are going to go high in the draft, Ty Madden from Texas is as good as it gets if you've watched him live this year. And they've got a great pitching staff, great closers behind them. And it's tough. I know, because Mississippi State can beat them in that first round game. I'm fully aware of that. And Tennessee can hit bombs with the best of them, but I am going to go with Texas to get out of that bracket. And then you talk about if both two teams' pitching staffs are intact for that championship series. Oh boy, guys, I think that could rank up there as one of the best TD Ameritrade era College World Series finals that you would see, would be those two teams duking it out. And at that point, I really, as tough as it is, I'm going to lean on Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter. That's two tough things. You're asking one of them to have a bad day or two of them to have a bad day. I don't think that's going to happen. And so I really think we're going to see Tim Corbin raise another trophy at TD Ameritrade Park this year. Vanderbilt's going to win this.
Vanderbilt's had great success in this ballpark, and 2 national titles, a runner-up finish, and interestingly enough, it's playing Arizona, which has also had great success in this ballpark when it's made it here. Won a national title in 2012, runner-up finish in 2016. So how those two teams handle it and how their managers sort of there's certain tactical things that you might do differently here in TD Ameritrade Park. Again, it has played more balanced and more true over the last couple of years, but certainly managing it. There's I'm sure there's things that guys do different in any ballpark. So they have found the formula previously. So we'll see how they do when they face off to start the series. Evan, what do you got? Who you picking?
Well, I agree with Z on the Vanderbilt front. Like if they can win that opener and stay on the winner's bracket and keep their pitching in line and from having to go too deep, man, what a 1-2 punch. And we've seen it time after time. If you have 2 top high-end starting pitchers, that buys you a ton once you get to the College World Series. So I think they're probably the team that I would pick as well in the top half. I mean, their starters are just too good. The bottom half, like Z said, is very deep. It's a very interesting bracket. I'm feeling Tennessee though. It feels like what Tony Vitello's got going on there. The way they had to get through the SEC, it just feels like they could keep this thing moving. They're a pretty balanced team too. Maybe not quite as much offensively as Texas, but man, they can murder the baseball. They're just a team that's kind of seen it all at this point. Like this is not going to be an overwhelming experience for them in this park compared to what they've seen all season. I just don't, think that'll be the case. And then I think the other thing that we haven't really talked about too much, that's sort of the great equalizer with this, when you look at this field, is that there really is there's almost no such thing as experience at this College World Series because you didn't have one last year. So like Vanderbilt's the defending national champion. Most of those guys weren't on the team 2 years ago. I think there were 10 that have come back that were even on the team. So like a lot of the best players, as you would imagine, have gotten drafted in the last 2 years. So in some ways, to say that this team's been here a lot or that team's been here a lot means less than it ever has. So I'm going to take the guys who had a tough experience this year through the SEC in Tennessee to make a run on the other side.
Well, I guess I just throw away my Mississippi State pick then, Evan, because I was going to pick. They've been here so long.
Do it.
You know what I will be interested to hear from the players and coaches is just like so many of these teams came from this like raucous and wild regional atmospheres, and while the College World Series has an intimidating element to it, it's a larger crowd, and you've heard former players in the college level who've played in the CWS mention like later in their careers, oh yeah, like I played in front of this many people in the CWS, like the MLB crowd isn't, I'm used to it, that type of thing. So it is different, and it has an impact. But like, I mean, all these teams at Tennessee's playing in front of these crazy crowds, and Mississippi State and NC State went through Arkansas, and like Vanderbilt, their crowds look good. I mean, it's just like everyone, all these regional atmospheres, or the atmospheres at regionals and super regionals were off the charts. And so will they bring an element of that? Will the fans bring an element of that here to the College World Series, and how the players do with it? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. I don't know, man. Evan, you kind of convinced me a little bit with the sort of like teams that have been through a lot and found a way to just keep persevering, and I like Virginia's moxie. So I'll pick a Virginia Stanford. I don't know if anybody going to pick that. I don't really know. I'm throwing darts at this point because the field's so competitive. So Virginia Stanford, and actually give me a Stanford victory. Cardinal, the tree for the championship. That would be fun. Stanford's only won it twice and won it back-to-back years in 87 and 88. So,
and if you saw how that team pitched in Lubbock this weekend in the Super Regional, yeah, not a far stretch, John.
I like the way that Stanford responded to that challenge, like going into Lubbock and dealing with, another, like Stanford, it feels like every year has had to, if it's advanced out of its regional, it's like, oh, well, here's Mississippi State. Like, here's Texas Tech on the road. That's a really tough atmosphere in the Super, but they handled it well. So, yeah, let's go. Like you said, you can make a case for anyone to win this thing. I'm going to go with Stanford, but it should be fun. Any parting shots? Anything else that we didn't miss? Or didn't touch on, guys? Like, the floor is yours for the final 30 seconds. What do you got? Anything?
What's the one hat you got to get? Of the 8 teams, you're going souvenir shopping. I'd like to know what's the one hat each of you got to get.
Good one.
I like the way Tennessee's orange pops. So we've already given a lot of love to their fight song, and now I'm going to give love to their orange, but it looks good. I don't know. I like it.
It's kind of like a sherbet orange. It's got a nice calming effect to it. They'll probably murder me for calling it sherbet orange, but it is.
Give me Arizona. I mean, that's a classic look. The uniforms are they're crisp too, but the hat, yeah, that's the classic A. Give me Arizona.
All right, for me, it's easy, man. I'm getting NC State, man. I want a Tuffy, the Strutting Wolf logo hat. Got to have it. I looked him up. He was created in 1921, but his name is Tuffy, the Strutting Wolf. It is a very unique logo if you have not seen NC State's logo.
Like the Scrappy Doo of the Wolf Pack. Like, put them up.
There you go. That's exactly what it reminds you of.
All right, good stuff, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoy our coverage leading up to the College World Series and obviously all the way through it. We're going to be on site. Z's going to be managing the photo staff, and they're going to take those iconic images and put them in the paper and online. And really enjoyable to see the work that they produce. And then on the writing side, myself, Evan, our team of sports writers are going to be covering this series like we always do. We're really excited. And we can't wait to tell some stories and recap the event, maybe provide a little bit of analysis along the way. And we appreciate your support, those who are reading and following our coverage. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the World-Herald. Please consider doing so. Really easy. And it benefits not only us, the work that we do, but so many of us on a staff that are putting in long hours to try to bring you the news that is relevant to the community and that is impactful here. So, again, thank you so much for watching and listening, and maybe we'll be back at the end of the series to recap it all. Like, again, I'm hoping for some iconic, legendary moments. We'll see if we get that. We've obviously got some really star-studded, talent-filled rosters that could produce it. So we'll see what we get. Should be fun. So for Evan, for Z, I'm John. Thanks for watching.